I am Sordicus, and in this video I will be documenting the events of the Groyper Culture War of Fall 2019. I've made every effort in this video to avoid giving my opinion on these events, so that those who are unfamiliar with one or both sides of the story can make up their own minds based on the facts and data I provide. I also have a link to a public Google Doc which lists my data and sources in the description. Before we get into the details, a brief overview. The first phase of these Groyper Wars consisted of individuals who identify themselves as Groypers, which is a derivative of the Pepe the Frog meme, going to a variety of conservative speaker events, especially those hosted by Turning Point USA and Young America's Foundation. At these events, the individuals would ask pressing questions on a number of topics which are typically attributed as farther right positions than those held by the speaker. For the purposes of this video, I will exclusively be focusing on the events hosted by Charlie Kirk, founder of TPUSA. A brief introduction for the two groups. Turning Point USA is a 501c3 nonprofit organization founded in 2012 by Charlie Kirk. The organization's mission is to identify, educate, train, and organize students to promote the principles of freedom, free markets, and limited government. On the other hand, we have Nicholas J. Fuentes and the Groypers, or Knickers as they call themselves, or America First Patriots. They go by many different names, and they're a somewhat amorphous group with Fuentes as their figurehead. Their ideology is much more difficult to clearly define because they're not a established organization in the same way that Turning Point USA is. They've been called many things, including white supremacists, neo-Nazis. They reject those labels. So for now, what I will go with is the description that Fuentes himself has given, which is that they are America First conservatives, and that they reject the label of white nationalism, but that they are warmer to the idea of awakening a sense of white identity in the white population in America. These individuals have a number of complaints against what they consider to be conservative Inc., or the sort of conservative establishment organizations that are fairly well entrenched. They generally believe that these campus conservative organizations are, one, acting as gatekeepers for what is considered to be mainstream conservatism. Two, that they are too supportive of legal immigration, so it's typical for these organizations to come out strongly against illegal immigration, but these individuals specifically criticize them for being too supportive of high-volume legal immigration. Third, they worry that these groups are too accepting of homosexuality and other, quote, deviant, unquote, lifestyles, and that they are abandoning their Christian morality, and that conservatives are simply becoming what liberals were 5 or 10 years ago. Fourth, they are concerned that these organizations are too deferent to Israel and not putting America first. And finally, they are concerned that these organizations are hypocritical about their stances on free speech, open dialogue. So the major questions we have to answer as observers of this are: how influential were these individuals in their campaign? Are they really who they say they are? Or conversely, are they really who the media says they are? Third, how did TPUSA respond to these inquiries? Fourth, was the Conservative Inc. response effective? And then fifth, what does this all mean for the future of the broad conservatism movement? So, getting started with the events. The first event was at Colorado State University on October 22nd, 2019. This event was live streamed by TPUSA, and on stage with Charlie Kirk was Donald Trump Jr. and his girlfriend, Kimberly Guilfoyle. The Q&A had a single line for questions, and of the 7 questions that were asked, 2 of them were Groypers. Next up, we had Charlie Kirk at the University of Iowa on the 23rd of October. This event was again live streamed by TPUSA. There were no on-stage guests, but Benny Johnson video called in from off-stage. During the Q&A, there was a single line for questions, and there was a much higher volume of questions during this event, which skewed some of the data you'll be seeing later, but of the 21 questions, 3 of them were Groypers. Up next was University of New Hampshire on the 24th of October. This event was again live streamed by TPUSA, and Senator Rand Paul was a guest. There was a single line for the questions, and of the 12 questions that were asked, 5 of them were Groypers. Now, this is not one of the culture war stops per se, but it is an important interceding event, and it's particularly relevant later when we go in to analyze the data. So at Politicon 2019, which took place October 26th to October 27th, Nick Fuentes showed up with some friends. He's pictured in the top picture with Vincent James of the Red Elephants at a TPUSA booth, and there they took several pictures at this booth holding up some of the literature that TPUSA had. Later on, when Fuentes approached Charlie Kirk, he was stopped by security. It's not clear to me, at the best of my research, whether or not this was specifically Kirk's security staff or whether it was the Politicon staff. Fuentes was also again stopped by security, which I do believe to be Politicon security staff, when he was trying to enter an event at which Kirk was speaking at Politicon. Now, Kirk denies that his staff were responsible for this and denies that he asked for Fuentes to be removed. So the next stop on the Culture War was Ohio State University on the 29th of October. This event was again live streamed by TPUSA. On-stage guests were Rob Smith, and this is notable because Rob Smith is a gay black veteran. Particularly the gay part is relevant later on to the questions. Fleck is also called in from offstage. The Q&A again had a single line for questions, and of the total 13 questions, 10 of them were Groypers. And during this time there was a significant increase in the number of questions about accepting LGBT individuals within the conservative movement and how these actions conflict with Christian conservatism. Also notable is that a TPUSA staff member was put in line to ask the last question, and there's pretty clear video evidence of this. The next stop, again, this was not officially part of the Culture War tour. This was for Don Jr.'s book launch. And again, Donald Trump Jr., Charlie Kirk, and Kimberly Guilfoyle were on the stage. This was an event that was not live streamed, which notes a departure from the previous events. And the Q&A was canceled, and the event, which was supposed to go for about 2 hours, ended up being canceled after approximately half an hour. The crowd was rather rambunctious and became very upset when they were told that there would not be a Q&A. And there was significant back and forth between the crowd and Kimberly Guilfoyle especially. This event also received significant media coverage from more mainstream sources. Next up was Florida State University on the 12th of November. Now, again, this event was not live streamed by TPUSA, which is different from all of the other Culture War stops thus far. On stage with Charlie Kirk was Graham Allen, a veteran, and there was a Q&A, and this time there were 2 lines, and they intended to have this separated by ideology, with far-right individuals on one side and far-left individuals on the other side. The Groypers, however, infiltrated both lines. Of the 13 total questions that were asked, 10 of them were Groypers. At this event, Charlie Kirk walked back his support for his previous stance, which he'd given in a number of events, of stapling green cards to diplomas. This is paired with a large increase in immigration and demographic questions from the Groypers. The next event was at the University of North Carolina on the 13th of November. This event was again not live streamed by TPUSA, and Laura Trump was there during the speech portion but was not present during the Q&A section. Again, there were 2 lines for the Q&A, separated with far right and far left intended, and again this did not quite work out as planned, as Groypers infiltrated both lines. Of the 12 questions that were asked, 7 of them were Groyper identified. During this event, Kirk was much more prepared, he engaged a lot more energetically and aggressively, and during the live stream, Fuentes was calling this event possibly a defeat. Later on, he settled with calling it a draw, and the final event of note is at the University of Houston on the 14th of November. This again was not part of the Culture War tour, which had officially ended the night before. This was again not live streamed by TPUSA, but this was a tabletop sort of event in the Steven Crowder style of Change My Mind. There was no line for the Q&A because of the style of the event. And of the 9 questions, it seemed that maybe 4 or 5 of them were Groypers. I went with 4 to be careful. The audio recordings that are available for this event, as it was not officially live streamed, were pretty bad and very difficult to hear. And at this event, another notable thing is that TPUSA came prepared and had a television screen connected to a computer of sorts hidden underneath a blanket on the table. When they got asked about Fuentes, they put up a clip of him speaking from high school. And this caused the crowd to boo energetically, and essentially following this, Kirk left and was chased out to booze. So here's some data analysis I did. This shows the total number of questions, the number of Groyper questions, and the number of non-Groyper questions. Of course, you can see that Iowa is a bit of an outlier, but generally you can see that the movement burgeoned right around the turn of the month and from October into November. So here I coded and broke down the questions by topic. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is that the number of free speech questions spiked on the 29th, and you'll remember that in the interim between New Hampshire and Ohio State, there was Politicon, wherein Fuentes was kicked out, and it was argued over whether or not this was related to Kirk asking for him to be kicked out or whether or not this was Politicon's decision. Nonetheless, there was an increase from 0 questions about free speech, free association, gatekeeping, and so on before that to now 3 during this event, and then more following. Second, at Florida State University, you'll notice that there was a significant increase in the number of questions related to demographics, immigration, and race. And this was likely related to the fact that Charlie Kirk had walked back his previous stance on stapling green cards to diplomas. Later we will get on to the fact that this did follow from a bit that Tucker Carlson did on his evening show. So moving on to some of the notable takeaways that followed from this. Kansas State's University's TPUSA chapter dissolved following the resignation of their president as a result of the ongoing conflict between TPUSA and the Groypers and the America First individuals. Fuentes, of course, claimed this to be a huge victory. As I'd mentioned before, Charlie Kirk did change one of his positions on stapling green cards to diplomas on the 12th of November while at Florida State University. It's unclear why, but it is largely attributable to the fact that he had been getting a lot of questions about this from Groypers, and that Tucker Carlson had broadcast a segment on this issue the exact night before where he vaguely quoted, but not directly quoted, Kirk's words about stapling a green card to their diploma. This was very likely to be influential, as Tucker Carlson is a much more notable figure than anyone we've talked about thus far. Another notable outcome is that Michelle Malkin has come out in favor of the Groyper stances on immigration, though it is unclear what her opinion is about the other elements of their platform. And she was let go by Young America's Foundation for doing so they will no longer be hosting her events on campus or at other locations. And they issued a statement reading that there is no room in mainstream conservatism for Holocaust deniers, white nationalists, street brawlers, or racists. It's interesting that this was paired with their letting go of Michelle Malkin, who is very clearly non-white, but nonetheless, she responded. She was unapologetic in her support. Again, another notable outcome is that Fuentes' YouTube subscribership spiked quite significantly during the period of the Groyper Wars. Over the past 30 days from when I've made this video, Nick Fuentes gained just short of 25,000 subscribers, which is a growth of 1,110%. In 1 week, he gained 10,000 subscribers, which is a very significant portion of his subscribership. Also notable, while I was looking at his YouTube statistics, I noticed that he dropped a significant number of views, around 2.4 million views. And this is most likely due to the fact that he put several of his old videos on private. He did about just short of 2 million views worth of videos on private on the 31st of October, and just short of 500,000 views worth of videos on private on the 18th of November. You may have noticed before that TPUSA stopped recording many of their events, or they stopped live streaming them rather. They in fact did not stop recording them, because later on clips were posted to Charlie Kirk's Instagram showing clips from these events. You can see at Florida State University that there was, you see Graham Allen, who's present, and one of the questions that was asked was posted there as part of a highlight reel, and the same thing at UNC. Charlie Kirk posted 2 clips to his Instagram from that event. So the major takeaways that I have for you are that a small and loosely organized group of dissident conservative voices were able to mobilize at mainstream conservative events and significantly disrupt the process at these events. The pressure from this dissident movement caused significant changes in the behaviors of TPUSA, from no longer live streaming their events to trying to change the order of the Q&A to even changing some stances, such as the immigration stance that Charlie Kirk walked back. Finally, the popularity of the dissident right-wing groups grew in popularity during this time and picked up a number of valuable allies, including Michelle Malkin more openly, and less directly but somewhat implicitly individuals like Ann Coulter, Tucker Carlson, who did a piece related to some of their concerns. So some future considerations that we as observers have to answer, and as also members of the conservative movement broadly. What does this do to our principles on free speech, free association, and the idea of gatekeepers? Do we believe that TPUSA and similar organizations have the right to determine what counts as and what doesn't count as conservatism? This is notably different from saying who's allowed in the organization, but many times, for example, during the Q&A, Charlie would say, "You are not a Trump supporter," if they had disagreed on a certain stance that Trump is in favor of, such as support for Israel or support for gay rights. Is this something that is a fundamentally conservative belief? Was this just heated language in the moment, or is this genuinely what these organizations believe? It's difficult to say, but that is one question that we, as a broader community, need to tackle. Second major question is, what is the identity and the policy of the party and the conservative libertarian union movement going forward? Will these conservative hardliners break off from these sort of more conservatarian, libertarian elements of the party and of the movement? Will their views be melded in to the larger fabric and under a bigger tent conservatarian merger? Will they split off the conservatives from the libertarians? These are questions that we have to answer and hopefully answer quickly going forward. The third, and in my opinion the largest question that we have to consider in the short term, is what the reaction from the left is going to do to us, in that the left has gleefully attributed many of these individuals who are alt-right, the Groyper types, and considering them to be white supremacists, and then at the same time tying them in with the larger conservative movement, considering them to be under the general right-wing umbrella. So how the left perceives this could be very important, not only because it will make it easier or harder to work with them, but most importantly, with the 2020 elections coming up, what will this do to the perception of the party for moderates who are, more swing voter types, who might be scared away by certain things like, oh, this person's a racist, and they might say, okay, well, I'm not voting for that side, let's go to the other side. This is something that's very important, and the counter-narrative that we are going to have to what the left says will be determinant in how seriously they are taken by the moderate types. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope that you found this informative. If you did, please leave a like. Let me know what you think about my questions that I have in the comments down below. And subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. Thank you very much. I am Swordicus. Have a great day.